Continuing with the WMO report called United in Science 2022, we come to the tipping points in the climate system again. I have just recorded another podcast on a paper that came out in Science arguing that we may hit some of the tipping points as early as 1.5 degrees C warming, and we are really close to that. And my own opinion was that these uncertainties of assigning thresholds of temperature are too high, and adding another alarmist message about tipping points being triggered by 1.5 degrees C warming, which is so close, could be just not that useful in terms of keeping the governments motivated on climate mitigation, adaptation, and other actions needed, especially considering that the technological promises on which we depend for the future pathways of net zero, decarbonization, and so on are still not there. Let's say in terms of scaling up of the carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration systems, which is also something we have discussed in other podcasts. I've also pointed out that the IPCC assessment reports are much more cautious about assigning specific temperature thresholds to these tipping elements. So it's worth revisiting this here again. So the key messages from the United in Science report are that major tipping points include changes in the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the melting of polar ice sheets, the migration of large-scale weather and climate patterns, drying of the Amazon rainforest, or disruptions of major weather systems such as the monsoon. And we also talked about how one paper from Bill Boos argues that the monsoon response seems to be fairly linear to various radiative forcings like increasing CO2 to very high levels, sulfate aerosols, black carbon, and so on. So some would argue that things like the monsoon and the Arctic sea ice should not even be included in the tipping point. So there are all these debates which are scientifically valid and robust scientific debates, but the question becomes one of normative, or how do we choose to message uncertainties of climate risk into the message that is put out officially by an organization like WMO or IPCC. One comment I got on the podcast that I posted on the science paper about tipping points argued that just by precautionary principle we should be doing something about it, or communicating the chances of tipping points being triggered even though there are uncertainties. Precautionary principle basically argues that even though we don't know, we don't always know and agree on what are the elements that are being affected by humans in terms of environmental change, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. Precautionary principle would require us to treat it as a risk and address it. Well, this is true, but there is still a debate, a very nice debate between Judy Curry, Kevin Trenberth, and Miles Allen in The Wire. I think it's a Elsevier publication, which looked at all the different aspects of applying the precautionary principle to climate change problem. My own point is that if resources were unlimited, yes, precautionary principles should be applied, and we should be preparing for all eventualities of climate change, and also the fact that we have a probability of getting hit by an asteroid, devastating earthquakes, super volcanoes, and so on. So unfortunately, limited resources are very limited, and it's a zero-sum game. And COVID shows that when we get hit with a crisis, our attention can deviate away from climate very quickly. So the emissions that had dropped during COVID, for example, have bounced right back, because even as normal life kicks in, there were stimulus funds put into play by many governments to revive the economies that had slowed down. And how do they revive the economy? By allowing people to have more money via direct stimulus funds or reduce taxes and so on, so that they can spend more and keep the economy going. Well, that's not very climate friendly. Not much of the money was put into climate action or green technologies and so on. So we have to keep this in mind, that economy always takes a priority, and when there is any crisis, then like the Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused energy problems in Europe, and Europeans are getting ready to burn coal and more wood if necessary to get through the winter. Well, what is the point of raising alarm about tipping points when we have so many problems to deal with in terms of staying focused on mitigation and adaptation? Okay, that would be my point. So, coming back to the key messages, the combined effects of higher temperatures and humidity during hot spells in some regions could reach dangerous levels in the next few decades. Could reach dangerous levels, so we have to be careful about the language, which could lead to physiological tipping points or thresholds beyond which outdoor human labor is no longer possible without technical assistance. So it's not just the warming. As warming happens, humidity increases, and then the body is not able to sweat when the dew point is reaching certain threshold, like 35 degrees centigrade. So if your body cannot cool by sweating, then you may have serious physiological conditions, death, and so on. Then you will need technical assistance. These are possibilities. Okay, so question is, how precise can we be about this? Further research on tipping points will be crucial to help society better understand the costs, benefits, and potential limitations of climate mitigation and adaptation in the future, because limitations of mitigation and adaptation can also come as maladaptations, where you plan for something based on uncertain projections, and then it turns out to be not the best strategy. So you have spent money, you have prepared for something, and that's not what happens. Okay, so let's say you prepared for extreme rainfall and floods, and you get hit with droughts and so on. So many possibilities are there. So the IPCC headline statements in the context of tipping points are as follows. Many changes due to past and future greenhouse gas emissions are irreversible for centuries to millennia, especially changes in the ocean, ice sheets, and global sea level. This is directly from the IPCC AR6 Working Group 1 report. There is no arguing that there are tipping points in the climate system. Glaciers which melt are not going to recover or reverse their course very quickly, even if mitigation and adaptation end up bringing us below 1.5 degrees miraculously, because they take thousands if not millions of years to build. And of course, many ecosystems may not recover as quickly either. The probability of low likelihood, high impact outcomes increases with higher global warming levels. We can say this with high confidence, but there is no temperature threshold being mentioned here. That's the key point. Abrupt responses and tipping points of the climate system, such as strongly increased Antarctic ice sheet melt and forest dieback, cannot be ruled out. We can say this with high confidence, again according to Working Group 1 of AR6. Again, there is no debate about this. The point is, do we know when these thresholds are going to be reached? Can we say really at 1.5 there is increased likelihood? Of course we can, but what if we hit 1.5 degrees C and none of the thresholds are triggered? Then what? You have to be aware that end justifies the means kind of approach is not good for science. Okay? The rise in weather and climate extremes has led to some irreversible impacts, as natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. We can say this with high confidence, again from Working Group 2 of the IPCC AR6. So there is no debate at all about the existence of climate tipping points and the fact that with increasing emissions and the continued warming, we are edging towards some of them. But how confidently can we say when they will be triggered and when we will hit that threshold warming levels is not very certain. So we have to be humble about adding that message to the overall global warming message, just in terms of the impact on food, water, energy, health, and the need for renewables, transportation, reducing emissions from agriculture, from buildings, from land use, from urbanization, and so on and so forth. So in the next podcast, we will look at some specific issues of urban climate change and adaptation mitigation issues there as well. Okay?